size isn't everything, but it sure makes for some impressive looking Gundams. So today I'm going over 10 of the biggest ones. Just keep the following two things in mind. 1, I'm only using the ones that were animated, otherwise this list would have been impossible to compile. And 2, for this list, I'm limiting myself to the official numbers that are available, so in some cases I had to compromise. But you know when you don't have to compromise? When you're buying sweet stuff from Japan with today's sponsor, Buyee, the premier proxy buying service for Japan-only stuff on websites like Yahoo Auctions, Mercari, Rakuten, Amazon, and many more. To buy items, you can either go through their website or use the new browser plugin to buy directly from selected websites. Not only is purchasing through them super convenient with real-time bidding and sniper bids, but with a purchasing fee of only 300 yen per item, it's also super cheap. And talking about auctions, you're only charged if you actually win the auction, so there's no need to pay anything in advance. Plus, if you want to buy more items but the auction end dates are all spread out, no problem, they'll keep your items for 30 days free of charge. And if you're afraid of your valuable package getting body slammed by the postal service, they also offer a reinforced package service, which I can personally attest to does a great job. And if you sign up using my link down below, you'll get a 2,000 yen coupon, which is basically 23 US dollars for you to spend on whatever Japanese culture you want. But now, back to the big topic at hand. And for reference, the average Gundam size across all of the series is around 18 meters, which nicely coincides with the original RX-78-2, which has a head height of exactly 18 meters. So when I tell you that the first and smallest Gundam on this list is the new Gundam, standing at an impressive 23 meters, you know we're in for a treat. And that size was for a very good reason too. During the Grips War and the first Neo-Zeon War, the mobile suit arms race reached its absolute peak. To push the machines even further, more energy was needed, requiring larger reactors, and in turn requiring larger mobile suits. Usually this meant heavy weaponry, like in the case of the Double Zeta Gundam or the Doben Wolf, but not so much for the new Gundam, as it was relatively lightly armed. Its reactor only had to provide power for 2 beam sabers, a beam rifle, and a beam cannon. The fin funnels that made this already big mobile suit even more giant all had their own generators. So instead, the power mostly goes to this machine's longer operating time and its surprising agility, the latter also being helped by the Psycho frame and the relatively light weight for its size. On number 9 then, we have the biggest 00 Gundam, the Reborns Gundam, which is essentially 2 mobile suits super glued together because its pilot was a strong, independent innovator who didn't need no support from nobody. And while by all accounts this should have been a bad idea, the end result was a 23.3 tall mobile suit that could quickly change between its close combat mode and long-range combat mode. With its plethora of weapons that consisted of multiple beam sabers, beam cannons, and fin fangs, this was truly made to tackle any situation by itself. Slightly bigger than was the Devil Gundam, also known as the Dark Gundam in English. Originally built as the Ultimate Gundam, this 23.9 meters tall behemoth was made with 3 main concepts in mind: the ability to self-recover, the ability to self-replicate, and the ability to self-evolve.
However, this ability to self-recover, allowing the deceased Dahal and his Gundam to keep on resurrecting. I'm positive this guy has acquired abilities of the Dark Gundam with the help of AEUG!
And it was this self-evolution that could have made the Devil Gundam number 1 on this list. It was able to evolve so much that it turned itself into the size of a colony, appropriately named the Devil Colony. The problem is just that we don't have any actual data on this form. And we're staying in the G Gundam universe with the Grand Gundam. And again, this is one of those cases where we're missing data. It's got a head height of 24.6 meters in its normal mode, but as you can probably tell by looking at the picture, its total height would have been significantly bigger. And what was pretty hilarious about this machine was that it actually still had a normal-sized head and only a somewhat large torso, relatively speaking. It was actually its giant thick limbs that gave this lumbering giant its enormous size. For number 6, we return to the Universal Century with the 26 meters tall Xe Gundam. And this was again one of those experimental UC machines that needed its size for the amount of stuff that was built into it. Its weapons were rather standard, with a beam rifle, beam sabers, a beam cannon equipped shield, and Psycommu guided missiles, but it also featured a development of the mobile suit sized Minovsky flight unit and beam barrier technology. And even though these systems had already been made more compact on the Xe Gundam, it was still quite a humongous machine, with only a few things being bigger than it. These include the next machines on my list and my disdain for its pilot, you team-killing simp.
Hathaway, are you okay?
Chan? Chan, you did that?
Stop it! Can't you see what you're doing?
You shouldn't have done that to her. You grown-ups don't know what you're doing. That's why you can destroy Earth without a second thought.
Hathaway!
But back to G Gundam now, with the not quite massive, but very tall Gundam Heaven's Sword. Also known as the Soaring Raven Gundam in the English dub, because apparently Heaven was a very sensitive topic for whoever decided to localize this. But yeah, as you've probably noticed, the big reason for this Gundam's length comes from its freakishly long head. I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but I just can't think of any. And because this thing appeared in G Gundam, there was only one thing going through my head the entire time.
Article 1 of the Gundam Fight International Regulations. A unit whose head section has been destroyed is disqualified.
But anyways, in 4th place then, we have the machine that served as part prototype, part sister unit for the Xe Gundam, the Odysseus Gundam. The big difference between the two units was that on the Xe Gundam, the Minovsky flight unit, the beam barriers, and the body of the Gundam had been made into a nice, somewhat streamlined package, whereas the Odysseus Gundam had to rely on add-on parts, the fixed flight unit, to get access to these things. The result was not just a bulkier and even more unwieldy looking Gundam, but also a significantly higher one. 32.5 meters to be exact. And with these extra parts, its name was also changed from the Odysseus to the Penelope. And another difference between it and the Xe Gundam was that the Penelope featured a significantly higher amount of weaponry. A trait that will continue with the top 3 of this list. But first we must have a look at today's honorable mention, the RX-78 GP03 Gundam Dendrobium, with an overall height of 38.5 meters and an overall length of 140 meters. This thing certainly qualified for the list, but what made me eventually decide to have it as an honorable mention was that it wasn't the actual Gundam that was massive, but rather the Orcus weapon platform that it went into. So make of that what you will. First up on the podium then, we have the Psycho Gundam, a giant 40-meter tall death machine that was honestly less Gundam and more walking gun turret. It's got 2 small beam cannons on the head, 3 scattering megaparticle cannons on its abdomen, and a beam cannon in each finger for a grand total of 10. And while you might think that a giant bullseye like this would be easy to take down, Its thick armor and anti-beam barrier would ensure that the Psycho Gundam wouldn't go down without a prolonged fight. Also, it could transform into the world's largest brick, allowing it to fly thanks to its Minovsky craft system. But it did also lose access to most of its weapons when doing so. And after having shown off its overwhelming power, the Psycho Gundam was further developed into the number 2 on this list, the Psycho Gundam Mark II. One of the most powerful and deadly weapons of the Grips War. On its 40.74 meters tall body, we can find 3 scattering megaparticle cannons, detachable Psychomu guided arms that can form a beam blade and have a beam cannon in each of the fingers, 2 small megaparticle cannons, and 20 normal megaparticle cannons that can then have their beams redirected through reflector bits, making the angle of attack very difficult to predict. And then in addition to being able to redirect its own beams, these last things could also be used to redirect enemy fire. And what might be even more surprising to hear was that this monstrosity was actually energy efficient, relatively speaking. Compared to its predecessor, the Psycho Gundam, the power of its reactor was only a little over half as powerful, and yet it was able to power significantly more weapons. And then finally, on number 1, we have the X-1 Destroy Gundam. A true monster of a Gundam that was essentially 56.3 meters of pure, concentrated, coordinator-hating firepower. And as its name indicated, this thing had a lot of tools at its disposal to destroy things. In mobile suit mode, it had access to a Zorn 200mm energy cannon, a whopping 20 Nefertem 503 plasma cannons, 3 Supercilla 1580mm energy cannons, 4 Eagle-Stellung 75mm Seawiz guns, 2 Mark 62 6-tube missile launchers, and 2 Sturmfaust detachable forearms that were functionally the same as Dragoons and also came with their own arsenal as well. Each of them is equipped with 5-finger beam guns and a positron reflector shield for defense. And unlike the regular Dragoons, these Doom Fists could also be used under gravity. When transforming into mobile armor mode then, it swapped out the use of the Zorn 200mm energy cannon for the 2 Aufprall Dreizehn twin energy cannons on its back, and it could now also use the 3rd positron reflector shield mounted on the backpack. The one issue with the Destroy Gundam for this list though is that Gundams from the Cosmic era are determined by their operating system. But in the Destroy's case, it uses the gigantic, unilateral, numerous dominating ammunition fortress operating system. So technically speaking, it's not a Gundam, but a Gundam. Also, of all of the giant machines on this list, this was the only one that went from an absolute unit to an absolute joke. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. But that has been all for this list of the 10 biggest Gundams. Let me know down below which one is your favorite, and stay tuned for the inevitable sequel of this video, the 10 smallest Gundams. As for my favorite giant Gundam, it's gotta be the Destroy Gundam. I would kill to have that thing as a giant 1/144th scale. Maybe one day. Anyways, a big thank you to Buyee for sponsoring this video. Again, link down below. And another big thanks to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.